Hello, friends. I want to welcome you to day 95 out of 100 days, 100 ways to study your scriptures. Today, I want to talk to you about studying other versions of the Bible. Sometimes this is a great thing to do. Apostles do it, and we can do it too. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of background first about the King James Version of the Bible. I did some research, got my study notes, super exciting. So this National Geographic came out in 2011 because that was the 400-year anniversary of the King James Version of the Bible. So just to give you a little bit of a backup on what is the King James Version of the Bible. One of the scholars said that this is the greatest thing that England has ever done, is to put out the King James Version of the Bible. So it's pretty special, pretty important. So Queen Elizabeth had been the queen for many years. Queen Elizabeth I, she passed away, and she didn't have any children. So they went to Scotland and got James, and then James became King James I. And he had a big problem in England at the time because there was a big division between the classes, especially between the Puritans and the royals, like the rich, and he wanted to bring them together. And so after many meetings, he decided that the best way to do that would be a little religious reform, and that England would come up with its own version of the Bible. And so the King James Version, it just takes other versions of the Bible like Wycliffe, Gutenberg, Luther, Tyndale, and or is it Tyndale? I don't know how to say it, I'm sorry. And just takes all the versions of the Bible, and then they translate it and do their best to come up with the King James Version of the Bible. One thing I love about the King James Version is it seems very poetic. I like to take a lot of scriptures and write songs to them so I can memorize them. And I find it so easy to do with the King James Version of the Bible. It's a little bit trickier to do when you're using like the Doctrine and Covenants, because it's just not as poetic, I guess. So I really like the King James Version. It's sometimes hard to understand because it is 400 years old and we don't talk like that anymore, but it's beautiful and poetic, so I like that. Remember when Joseph Smith was trying to decide what church to join, and he turned to James chapter 1, verses 5 and 6. If any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, that giveth to all men liberally, and upbraideth not, and it shall be given him. But let him ask in faith, nothing wavering. For he that wavereth is like a wave of the sea, driven with the wind and tossed. That came from his Bible, his family Bible, and it was a King James Version. So this is my own personal opinion, but I've always felt like, oh, Joseph Smith read from the King James Version. That's where the restoration of the gospel stemmed from. So I am going to study from the King James Version also, and I believe that's why we're encouraged to use that version in our church. You'll probably notice in conference sometimes, I started to notice a few years ago that some of the apostles use other versions of the Bible, other translations. So they're still taking it from the original text, from the Hebrew and Latin and then Greek, and then they're translating it, but the translations are a little bit different. And I'm not a super scholar here. I'm just giving you the lowdown in a nutshell. But President Uchtdorf over the years has used the English Standard Version of the Bible, the New International Version of the Bible, and the New English Translation of the Bible. Neil A. Maxwell has used various translations of the Bible in his general conference addresses. Robert D. Hales and Jeffrey R. Holland and others. And so I'm going to link in the description. John Hilton III has a whole thing of the top 10 versions of the Bible and different general authorities who's used them, if you're interested in looking at that. And the reason I really got interested in it is because reading for Come Follow Me, we've been talking about the letters of Paul, and they're really confusing sometimes, and you don't know what they're talking about. And I've listened to various podcasts, and people have said maybe you want to try this version of the Bible just to read it and just to get another feel for the things that Paul might be saying. So I thought that was a really good idea. And I also came across one of my seminary students a few years ago, told me about Bible Hub, and I will also link Bible Hub below. It takes every single scripture from the Bible, has all the different translations, like many, many translations into English. And then also you can just see what all the different scholars have had to say about the different translations and the different scriptures. Not really the translations, but the different scriptures, what different scholars have said about it. And it's really interesting and valuable, and it just gives you more insight. Of course, we are, like I said, definitely encouraged to really focus with the King James Version. I think it was really inspired of God after doing my reading here. But sometimes you might want to look to other things. So my son and I went to Home Depot, and they had these New Testaments from the Gideon Bible. And so I just read to you James chapter 1, verse 5 and 6. If any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God. And I just thought it'd be interesting to read a different version of the same scripture, and by version, I mean translation. It's a different translation. So the Gideon Bible Society uses the New Living Translation of the Bible. So here it is. James chapter 1, verses 5 and 6. If you need wisdom, ask our generous God, and he will give it to you. He will not rebuke you for asking. But when you ask him, be sure that your faith is in God alone. Do not waver, for a person with divided loyalty is as unsettled as a wave of the sea that is blown and tossed by the wind. It's still beautiful. Gives you a little bit different insight. Personally, I prefer King James. I think it's more poetic. And I do have a song that I sing in my head when I do the King James one. But it's just an interesting way to study, especially if you feel like you're stuck and you don't know what Paul is saying or John is saying. Check out Bible Hub. Check out what the prophets and apostles have said about that scripture. And it's just a super great way to do it. So I hope you have a great day studying your scriptures. And I will see you next time. Bye.